The void of space trembled as reality itself seemed to tear apart at the edge of our solar system. What emerged from that cosmic wound would have made even the bravest souls question everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. The Corvin war fleet didn't just arrive, they erupted into existence like a nightmare-given form, the crystalline battleships, pulsing with an energy so raw and violent it could crack planets in half. Commander Vexthur stood on the bridge of his flagship, the World Breaker, savoring this moment like a fine wine. His scarred face told the story of 43 conquered civilizations, each scar a trophy from species that had dared to resist the might of the Galactic Empire. The cybernetic implants covering half his skull glowed with malevolent light as he accessed the tactical data streaming in from his scouts. Pathetic radio signals and chemical rockets, he snarled, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The bridge crew-hardened veterans who had witnessed the glassing of entire worlds nodded in grim agreement. They had seen this dance before, performed it across countless star systems where hope died and civilizations crumbled. But here's the thing about assumptions. They have a nasty habit of making you look like a fool when reality comes knocking. And reality was about to deliver a knockout punch that would echo across the galaxy. The plan was as elegant as it was brutal. The Corvins had perfected this symphony of destruction over centuries of conquest. First, they would decloak their massive fleet just outside the planet's atmosphere, letting the primitive inhabitants witness their technological superiority. The psychological impact alone usually caused most governments to surrender within hours. Then came the demonstration, a single surgical strike that would vaporize a major city, proving that resistance was not just futile, but suicidal. Vexthur's tactical officer, a young hotshot named Kexmore, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Commander, shall we begin the intimidation protocol? Their primitive defense satellites are already going haywire just from our presence." The commander's laugh was like grinding metal. "Patience, young warrior. Let them scramble their pathetic aircraft first. I want to see the fear in their eyes when they realize their weapons are nothing more than toys." But as the Corvin fleet began its descent toward Earth's atmosphere, something happened that made Vexthur's blood freeze in his veins. The tactical display, which should have shown scattered human vessels fleeing in terror, instead revealed something that defied all logic and expectation. The ocean below wasn't empty. It wasn't even sparsely defended. It was crawling with metal. Predators. Hundreds upon hundreds of sleek, deadly warships stretched across the Pacific like a vast mechanical ecosystem. These weren't the crude, boxy vessels the Corvins had expected from their intelligence reports. These ships moved with predatory grace, their hulls gleaming with an almost organic fluidity that spoke of engineering principles the Corvins thought they had monopolized. "What in the seven hells is that?" Kexamore whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. Vexthur stared at the display, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was impossibly sophisticated. Energy readings were off the charts. Their formation patterns suggested tactical doctrine that rivaled the Empire's own military academies. And most disturbing of all, they weren't running, they were waiting. The communication array crackled to life, and a human voice cut through the static with crystal clarity. The speaker was using perfect Corvan military protocols, something that should have been impossible for a species that had barely begun exploring their own star system, Corvan fleet. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We've been expecting you." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Expecting them? How could these primitives have been expecting them? The Empire's approach had been calculated to achieve total tactical surprise. Their stealth technology was supposedly undetectable by any civilization. Below Class 7 on the galactic development scale, Vexthur's scarred face contorted with rage and confusion. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates they've barely achieved faster-than-light communication. You shouldn't even know we exist. But the human admiral wasn't finished. "We know about Mars. We know about the colonies you've destroyed. And we know exactly why you're here." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. "Mars. The Corvins had indeed sterilized several human outposts in the outer system, months of routine elimination of potential future threats. But those attacks had been conducted by stealth ships, leaving no survivors and no evidence. How could Earth possibly know? Commander, the tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. Their weapon systems are powering up. Energy signatures are. They're impossible. These readings suggest technology that rivals our own battlecruisers. Vexler's mind reeled. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. Primitive species were supposed to cower before the Empire's might. They were supposed to beg for mercy, not issue challenges with fleets that seemed to have materialized from nightmares. The human admiral's voice returned, now carrying an edge that made veteran warriors shiver. You came here expecting to find victims. Instead, you've found something far more dangerous, a species that doesn't just fight to survive. We fight to win. And that's when the real shock hit. The ocean below erupted in a display of coordinated firepower that turned the darkening sky into a blazing inferno. But this wasn't random desperation. This was precision warfare conducted by minds that understood the art of destruction better than the Corvins had ever imagined. The first salvo wasn't aimed to destroy. It was aimed to send a message. That message was written in plasma fire across the heavens. Welcome to Earth. Population extremely dangerous. What happened next would shatter everything the Corvins thought they knew about warfare, about humanity, and about the true balance of power in the galaxy. But that's a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the underdog's chance of survival. Speaking of underdogs and unexpected victories, there's another powerful force that most people completely underestimate: the incredible power of compounding. Just like humanity's hidden strength in our story, small, consistent actions can build into something absolutely unstoppable over time. Check out my next video where I reveal how this same principle can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Storm clouds above the Pacific Ocean had been gathering for hours, as if nature itself sensed the cosmic confrontation about to unfold. Lightning split the darkening sky in jagged patterns. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared the universe for the electrical storm that was about to be unleashed by human ingenuity and pure, concentrated rage. Admiral Jake Morrison stood like a statue of vengeance on the bridge of the USS Thunderbolt, his weathered hands gripping the command rail so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The man who had once been known for his easy smile and quick jokes now carried the weight of an entire species' survival on his shoulders. His steel-gray eyes tracked the alien fleet's descent through the storm clouds, each ship a reminder of the nightmare that had changed everything around him. Stretching beyond the horizon in every direction lay the largest naval formation in human history. 800 warships each, one a masterpiece of engineering that had been born from humanity's darkest hour. These weren't the clunky, primitive vessels the aliens expected. These were predators, sleek and deadly, their hulls crackling with energy signatures that would have made even the most advanced civilizations pause and reconsider their life choices. But here's where it gets interesting, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this part. These ships weren't just impressive, they were impossible. At least they should have been impossible for a species that had barely figured out how to leave their own solar system just decades earlier. Lieutenant Emily Parker's voice cut through the bridge's tense silence like a blade. Sir, they're broadcasting surrender demands. Her words carried the kind of barely controlled fury that comes from watching your entire worldview get shattered in real time. 3 months ago, she had been a peaceful communications officer, more concerned with decoding radio signals from distant galaxies than preparing for interstellar war. Morrison's jaw muscles worked like steel cables under stress. The memory was still fresh, still bleeding in his mind like an open wound. 3 months ago, these same crystalline monstrosities had appeared without warning at the Mars colony. No demands, no negotiations, no mercy, just pure clinical destruction. That had turned 10,000 human beings into vapor and glass. Among those 10,000 was Lieutenant Commander David Morisonjic's younger brother. The dreamer who had always believed humanity's future lay among the stars. David had been leading the terraforming project, turning red dust into gardens where human children could play. The aliens had erased him and his dreams in 17 seconds of concentrated fire. What exactly are they demanding? Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and didn't particularly care about the answer. The usual Conqueror's menu, Parker replied, her fingers dancing over the communications console. Complete surrender, immediate disarmament, in preparation for what they're calling species integration, which is based on our intelligence from the outer colonies, is a fancy way of saying slavery. Now, you might be wondering how Earth had managed to build a fleet that could challenge an interstellar empire. The answer lies in something the aliens couldn't have predicted: the terrifying efficiency of human beings when they're properly motivated. And nothing motivates humans quite like the promise of revenge served ice cold. Morrison turned to his tactical officer, Commander Lisa Hayes, a woman whose reputation for strategic brilliance was matched only by her legendary temper. "Lisa, what's our fleet status?" Hayes smiled, and it was the kind of smile that would have made sharks nervous. "All 800 ships are in position, Admiral. Weapons charged, shields up, and every captain in the fleet is personally invested in making these aliens regret the day they were hatched." The bridge erupted in quiet chuckles, a moment of dark humor that cut through the tension like a pressure valve releasing steam. But the laughter died quickly as the reality of their situation settled back in. "Sir," the weapons officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy buildups from their lead ships. They're preparing to demonstrate their firepower." Morrison's eyes never left the tactical display. Standard intimidation tactics. "They glass one of our cities, we soil ourselves in terror, and then we hand over the keys to the planet." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the bridge. "Too bad for them, we're not standard anything." The communication array crackled to life with an alien voice speaking in mechanical, translated English. The words were exactly what they expected: ultimatums, threats, and the kind of arrogant demands that had probably worked on 43 other worlds. But Earth wasn't world number 44. Earth was the place where humanity had learned to turn grief into weapons and rage into precision engineering. "All ships, weapons free," Morrison growled into the fleet communication system. His voice carried across 800 bridges, reaching thousands of sailors, pilots, and officers who had spent the last 3 months preparing for this exact moment. Show them what happens when you mess with Earth. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations, if any military academies survived what was coming. The first salvo wasn't just an attack, it was a statement written in plasma fire across the heavens. 800 ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower turning the storm-darkened sky into a blazing inferno that could be seen from orbit. The aliens' energy shields, which had probably never failed in centuries of conquest, flared like dying stars and collapsed under the impossible barrage. The crystalline warships that had seemed so invincible just moments before began to burn and tumble through Earth's atmosphere like fallen angels. Direct hits across their entire front line, Hayes reported, her voice filled with the kind of professional satisfaction that comes from a job well done. "Their shield technology appears to be significantly less advanced than our intelligence estimates suggested." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. "Or maybe our weapons are significantly more advanced than their intelligence estimates suggested." The first phase of the battle was over in less than 60 seconds, but the real war, was just beginning. Because what the aliens were about to discover would change everything they thought they knew about warfare, about humanity, and about the true cost of picking the wrong fight. The question now wasn't whether Earth could defend itself. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity was about to become. And speaking of transformation and unexpected power, there's another force that most people completely underestimate: the incredible ability of small, consistent actions to compound into something absolutely unstoppable, just like humanity's hidden strength in our story. The power of compounding can take something that seems insignificant and turn it into a force that reshapes entire worlds. Check out my next video where I reveal how this same principle can transform your life in ways that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about success. The mathematics of warfare had just been rewritten in plasma fire and human ingenuity. and Commander Vexther's battle-hardened mind was struggling to process equations that simply didn't add up. Standing in the wreckage of what had been the most advanced battle bridge in the Corvan fleet, he watched his tactical displays paint a picture that violated every principle of galactic conquest he had learned over 3 decades of military dominance. His scarred hands, the same hands that had personally executed the surrender. Documents of 43 civilizations now trembled as they gripped the twisted metal of his command console. The cybernetic implants in his skull were working overtime, trying to recalculate scenarios that kept coming back with the same impossible result. Humanity was winning. Asher. His tactical officer Kexmore called out, his voice cracking with the kind of fear that comes from watching your entire worldview collapse in real time. Their weapon systems, they're not just advanced, they're revolutionary. Vexer's remaining organic eye focused on the data streaming across his damaged displays. Each human missile that had struck his fleet carried technology that shouldn't exist on a planet still burning fossil fuels for energy. The targeting systems demonstrated quantum-level precision that the Corvan Empire had taken centuries to develop. The propulsion signatures suggested these primitives had somehow mastered controlled nuclear fusion and miniaturized it into weapons that could fit on their relatively tiny vessels. But here's where it gets really interesting, and trust me, you're going to want to pay attention to this part because it changes everything we thought we knew about technological development. The humans hadn't just stolen or reverse-engineered alien technology. They had independently developed solutions that the Corvans considered the pinnacle of military engineering. Impossible, Vexther muttered, his voice carrying the weight of a worldview crumbling like ancient stone. Our intelligence reports indicated they were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Should be throwing rocks at us, not quantum-guided plasma charges. Through the fractured viewing portal of his flagship, Vexther watched something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Human aircraft fighters that should have been primitive chemical-powered toys were performing maneuvers that defied every law of physics he thought he understood. They moved like living things, dancing through the debris field of destroyed Corvan ships with a grace that seemed to mock the very concept of aerodynamic limitations. One human pilot, Alcine Reaper 6, pulled a maneuver that made Vexther's tactical computer throw up error messages. The fighter inverted itself, rotated 90 degrees along its axis, and then accelerated in a direction that should have turned the pilot into organic paste. Instead, the aircraft emerged from the impossible, turned and locked onto a fleeing Corvan destroyer with surgical precision. How are they surviving those G-forces? Kexmore whispered, his earlier bravado now nothing but a memory. Those maneuvers should liquefy any biological entity. Vexther's mind raced through the possibilities. Enhanced pilots? Artificial gravity systems? Or had humanity somehow solved the fundamental problem of biological limitations that had plagued every spacefaring species in the galaxy? The answer came in the form of intercepted human communications. The pilots weren't just surviving those impossible maneuvers, they were laughing about them. One voice crackled through the static. "Come on, Ghost Leader, my grandmother could pull more G's than that." Another pilot responded with what could only be described as enthusiastic whooping, as he executed a turn that would have killed a Corvan warrior instantly. "They're treating this like a game," Vexther said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're enjoying themselves." But the real shock came when his science officer, Madar, approached with a datapad that might as well have been a death sentence. For everything the Corvan Empire believed about galactic civilization, Commander, Madar's voice carried the kind of academic excitement that comes from discovering something that rewrites textbooks. "I've been analyzing their ship configurations. They're not just functional, they're elegant. The engineering principles suggest they've independently developed solutions we consider advanced theoretical concepts." Vexther snatched the datapad, his cybernetic eyes scanning the technical readouts with desperate intensity. What he saw made his knees weak. The human vessels weren't crude metal boxes held together with primitive welding. They were works of art, each whole curve and weapon placement optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum energy waste. "Look at this," Madar continued, his scientific mind temporarily overriding his survival instincts. "They've solved the plasma containment problem using magnetic field manipulation techniques that our best engineers are still struggling with. And their power distribution systems, they're using quantum entanglement for instantaneous energy transfer across their entire fleet grid. The implications hit Vexter like a physical blow. Quantum entanglement for fleet coordination meant the humans could coordinate their attacks with precision that the Corvin Empire had never achieved. It meant their 800 ships weren't just fighting as individual units, they were fighting as a single unified organism with a collective intelligence that could adapt and respond faster than any military doctor in the galaxy had ever seen. "Sir," another officer called out, his voice tight with panic. "We're receiving reports from across the fleet. The humans aren't just defending their hunting. They're systematically eliminating our ships using tactics that suggest they've been studying our military doctrine for years." Years. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. How long had humanity been preparing for this moment? How long had they been watching, learning, and building their impossible fleet, while the Corvin Empire assumed they were nothing more than primitive savages? Through the chaos of battle, Vexter watched as a human battleship, something they were calling the USS Retribution, engaged 3 Corvin heavy cruisers simultaneously. The human vessel moved with predatory grace, its weapon systems cycling through different energy frequencies to find the exact resonance needed to collapse Corvin shields. It was like watching a master surgeon perform an operation, each cut precise and intentional. "Perhaps," Vexter said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of a commander who had just realized he was no longer the apex predator in this cosmic food chain, "we should adjust our approach." But even as he spoke those words, he knew it was too late. The humans had revealed their hand, and it was a royal flush in a game where the Corvins had been playing with a deck of cards didn't even know existed. The question now wasn't whether humanity could defend their planet. The question was whether the Corvin Empire could survive what they had just awakened. And speaking of awakening hidden potential, there's another force that most people never recognize until it's too late: the incredible power of compounding. Just like humanity's hidden technological advances in our story, small, consistent improvements can build into something absolutely unstoppable over time. Check out my next video where I reveal how this same principle can transform your life in ways that will completely change how you think about success and achievement. 20 minutes. That's all it took for the most feared military force in the galaxy to learn the hard way that humanity had been seriously underestimated. 20 minutes to turn the Corvin Empire's reputation from unstoppable conquerors to cautionary tale. 20 minutes to prove that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted in ways that rewrite the very laws of cosmic warfare. The tactical displays on Commander Vexter's shattered bridge told a story that would haunt him for whatever remained of his miserable life. Half of his once mighty fleet now drifted through space as burning wreckage, their crystalline hulls cracked in bleeding atmosphere like dying stars. The other half, the survivors, found themselves in a situation that violated every principle of military strategy he had ever learned. They were surrounded, not by crude, desperate defenders fighting for their lives, but by human warships that moved with the kind of predatory grace that made apex predators look like house cats. These vessels circled the remaining Corvin ships like sharks, sensing blood in the water, their weapon systems tracking every movement with the patience of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Vexer's hands, the same hands that had signed the death warrants of entire civilizations, now shook uncontrollably as he stared at the tactical display.
Ow.
His cybernetic implants were overheating from trying to process data that simply didn't compute. How had this happened? How had 43 consecutive victories turned into the most humiliating defeat in Corvin military history? How, he whispered, the word barely audible above the crackling of damaged electronics and the groans of twisted metal. It was a question that carried the weight of a shattered empire and the desperate plea of a warrior who had just discovered he was playing in a league he never knew existed. The main screen flickered to life, and Admiral Jake Morrison's face appeared, with the kind of crystal clarity that suggested Earth's communication technology was just as advanced as their weapon systems. But it was Morrison's eyes that truly drove home the magnitude of the situation, cold as Arctic ice, burning with the focused fury of a man who had waited 3 months to deliver justice for his murdered brother. You want to know how? Morrison's voice carried the authority of someone who had just proven that humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. We've been preparing for this day since we learned you existed. Every factory, every laboratory, every human mind, focused on one goal: making you pay. And that's when the real horror of the situation hit Vexter like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just randomly developed advanced technology. They had been preparing, planning, building for months, while the Corvin Empire had been congratulating itself on another easy conquest. Humanity had been turning their entire civilization into a weapons factory. Behind Morrison, the bridge of the USS Thunderbolt bustled with activity that spoke of military precision refined to an art form. Tactical officers coordinated the hunt for fleeing alien ships with the same casual efficiency you'd expect from air traffic controllers managing a busy airport. Communications specialists intercepted and decoded Corvin military transmissions in real time, turning the aliens' own battle coordination against them. But here's what really made Vexter's blood run cold. The humans weren't just defending their planet anymore. They were hunting, systematically, methodically, with the kind of cold precision that came from having planned this moment down to the last detail. Lieutenant Parker Morrison called out without taking his eyes off the screen. What's the status? On the alien vessels attempting to flee toward the outer system? 3 destroyers and a battle cruiser, sir? Parker's voice carried the professional satisfaction of someone who had just watched months of preparation pay off in spectacular fashion. The Vigilant and her escort group are already in position. The aliens are flying straight into a trap they don't even know exists. Vexter's organic eye widened in horror. The humans had anticipated their retreat routes. They had positioned ships to cut off escape vectors before the battle had even begun. This wasn't just military strategy. This was psychological warfare designed to break the enemy's will to fight. Your empire made one mistake, Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You thought we were just another primitive species. But humans don't just fight to survive. We fight to win. The words hit like hammer blows because they carried the ring of absolute truth. The Corvin Empire had built their reputation on conquering species that fought desperately for survival, throwing everything they had at overwhelming odds in the hope of buying time for their populations to escape or surrender. But humanity had approached this conflict with an entirely different mindset. They hadn't just prepared to survive an invasion. They had prepared to win a war. You want to know what your real mistake was? Morrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You killed people we cared about. You turned our grief into weapons and our rage into precision. Engineering. You gave us a reason to stop being explorers and start being warriors. Through the fractured viewing ports of his flagship, Vexter watched human fighters perform search and rescue operations with the same deadly efficiency they had used in combat. They were pulling survivors from damaged Corvin vessels not out of mercy, but to gather intelligence. Every rescued alien was a potential source of information about fleet movements, military protocols, and the locations of other Corvin assets. Sir Kexmore's voice cracked with the kind of fear that comes from watching your entire worldview collapse in real time. They're not just defeating us, they're studying us, learning from us. Every ship they capture, every officer they interrogate there, building a database of everything we know about galactic warfare. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just defending Earth, they were preparing to take the war to the Corvin Empire. They were treating this battle not as a desperate last stand, but as a learning opportunity, chance to field test their technology against the galaxy's most feared military force and use the results to plan their next moves. Admiral Morrison. Vexer's voice carried the weight of a warrior who had just realized he was no longer the apex predator in this cosmic food chain. What do you want? Morrison's smile was the kind that would have made veteran warriors reconsider their career choices. Want? Commander, you've already given us everything we wanted. You've proven that humanity belongs in this galaxy. You've shown us that our technology works. You've provided us with the perfect excuse to stop playing. defense and start playing offense. The communication channel went dead, leaving Vexthor alone with the burning wreckage of his fleet and the terrible knowledge that the Corvan Empire had just awakened something far more dangerous than another primitive species fighting for survival. They had awakened humanity. Humanity, as it turned out, was very good at turning preparation into devastation. What happened next would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. But the real question wasn't whether humanity could defend their planet. It was whether the galaxy was ready for what Earth was about to become. And speaking of preparation and the power of focused effort, there's another force that most people never recognize until it's too late to matter: the incredible power of compounding. Just like humanity's methodical preparation in our story, small, consistent actions can build into something absolutely unstoppable over time. Check out my next video where I reveal how this same principle can transform your life in ways that will completely change how you think about success and long-term achievement. The universe held its breath as the last Corvan ships limped away from Earth's solar system like wounded animals fleeing from a predator they had foolishly mistaken for prey. Their once magnificent crystalline hulls were now scarred with burn marks that told the story of humanity's first lesson in galactic warfare, a lesson written in plasma fire and sealed with the blood of would-be conquerors. These weren't the same vessels that had arrived with such arrogant confidence just hours earlier. The survivors dragged themselves through space with damaged engines and shattered pride, their crews broken not just by the devastating defeat, but by the terrible knowledge that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's power structure had just been turned upside down. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, not even the humans themselves, could have predicted. This wasn't just a victory. This was the birth of a new galactic order. And the ripple effects were already racing across the stars at faster-than-light speeds. On the bridge of the USS Thunderbolt, Admiral Jake Morrison stood like a statue carved from determination and tempered by loss. His steel-gray eyes tracked the fleeing alien vessels with the cold satisfaction of a man who had just delivered justice for his murdered brother. The same screens that had shown incoming enemy forces now displayed the retreating remnants of what had been considered the galaxy's most feared military machine. Major Tom Bradley approached with the kind of measured steps that suggested he was carrying information that would change everything. In his hands, he held a datapad crackling with intercepted communications from across the Corvan Empire, messages that painted a picture of an organization in complete chaos. Admiral Bradley's voice carried the weight of someone who had just witnessed history being rewritten in real time. We're picking up chatter from across their empire. The word is spreading faster than their fastest ships. They're calling Earth the Forbidden Zone now. Morrison's jaw tightened, but there was no satisfaction in his expression, only the grim determination of a leader who understood that this victory was just the beginning of something much larger. What else are they saying? Bradley consulted his datapad, his eyebrows rising as he processed the intelligence streaming in from human listening posts scattered across the outer system. Sir, some of their colonies are already surrendering rather than risk us coming for them. We're detecting panic evacuations from systems within 50 light-years of Earth. They're not just afraid, they're terrified. And they should be terrified. Because what had just happened above Earth wasn't just a military defeat, was a demonstration that humanity had evolved beyond the Corvan Empire's ability to comprehend or control. The aliens had come expecting to find another primitive species, to crush beneath their boots. Instead, they had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. Morrison nodded slowly, his mind already moving beyond the immediate victory to the long-term implications. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them understand that humanity doesn't forget, and we don't forgive. But the real shockwaves were just beginning to spread through the galaxy. In the hours following the battle, something unprecedented began to happen. Species that had been conquered by the Corvan Empire started to whisper about hope. Planets that had been ground under the boot of alien oppression began to dream of freedom. The human victory wasn't just changing the balance of power, it was inspiring a galaxy-wide revolution. Lieutenant Emily Parker looked up from her communications, consoled with the kind of expression that suggested she had just discovered something that would rewrite the textbooks on interstellar relations. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from dozens of worlds. They're asking for our help. They want to know if humanity will support their independence movements." Morrison felt the weight of an entire galaxy's hopes settling on his shoulders. This was the moment when Earth would have to decide what kind of galactic citizen it wanted to be. The easy path would be to consolidate their victory and focus on defending their own territory. But the harder path, the path that would honor the memory of everyone who had died on Mars, was to ensure that no other species would ever have to face what humanity had just endured. "Open channels to all requesting worlds," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just realized that this battle was never really about Earth at all. It was about proving that bullies could be beaten, that tyranny could be overcome, and that sometimes the underdog really could rewrite the rules of the game. As Earth's battle fleet regrouped in the aftermath of victory, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The age of human dominance hadn't just begun, it had arrived with the force of a supernova, changing everything it touched. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the Corvin Empire in control for centuries was crumbling like ancient stone. But what made this transformation truly remarkable wasn't just humanity's military might. It was their approach to victory, where the Corvins had ruled through fear and oppression. The humans were building something entirely different, a coalition of the willing, united not by conquest but by shared values and mutual respect. "Commander," Lisa Hayes approached Morrison with a tactical report that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. "Admiral, we're receiving requests from 17 different species, asking to join what they're calling the Human Alliance. They're offering everything from raw materials to technological exchanges to military support." Morrison allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine expression of joy he had felt since his brother's death. "Tell them we'll consider all offers of genuine partnership, but make it clear that we're not interested in building an empire. We're interested in building something better." The aliens had expected to find victims when they arrived at Earth. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than another species fighting for survival. They had awakened humanity's sense of justice, their capacity for strategic thinking, and their absolute refusal to accept that might makes right. The Corvin Empire had ruled the galaxy through fear and superior technology. But humanity was about to teach the universe that there was something more powerful than fear-hope. And hope, as it turned out, is the most contagious force in the galaxy. As the last of the alien ships disappeared into the void, Morrison thought about his brother David and all the others who had died, believing that humanity's future lay among the stars. They had been right, but not in the way anyone had expected. Humanity's future wasn't just about exploring the galaxy, it was about transforming it. The age of human dominance had begun, forged in plasma fire and tempered by unbreakable will. The galaxy would never be the same. And speaking of transformation and the power of consistent effort, there's another force that most people never recognize until it's too late: the incredible power of compounding. Just like humanity's methodical preparation that led to their stunning victory, small, consistent actions can build into something absolutely unstoppable over time. Check out my next video where I reveal how this same principle can transform your personal and professional life in ways that will completely change how you think about success and long-term achievement. The END.